we're okay.
Okay.
Well, welcome. I'm Georgia
Hello.
Court, proprietor of Bookstore Number One in Sarasota, and my sidekick here is Elsie Souza, who has been the I don't want to say oldest, but
I'm the oldest and the oldest.
right, and the most wonderful person ever at Bookstore One. And we're here to speak with Gina Barreca about her new wonderful book, Fast Famous Women. So, okay, Gina, we're so thrilled to see you.
I am thrilled to be here. As you know, Georgia, I mean, it is one of the senses that I have that like now the book is real. It's like I get to talk to Bookstore One and we get to have a conversation. And there's Sydney. Hi, Sydney, who's a former student who went and just got her MA at Bath Spa University in writing, where my friend Faye Weldon, remember Faye Weldon, great British writer, Faye Weldon, who was in the first book, her last published piece that she published before she died was in the, I think, I don't know, Laura, if your mic is on, I'm hearing, there you go, thanks, babe. And that Faye was at Bath Spa. And so I love when there are connections. So Faye Weldon was sort of my mentor as a young writer, and Sydney was in my classes at UConn, and then she went to Bath Spa. It's the connection. So that's what the new book is about. So it's Fast Famous Women. Laura Rossi was a former student, and she's now like the best publicist in the world, but she is also in the book talking with her daughter about Taylor Swift.
Mm-hmm.
Amy Hartle Sherman is in the book, and she's been in other issues, other editions of Fast Famous, and talking about Marilyn Monroe. And so it's again the interwoven nature of putting these. It's been four fast women, right? 4 books over 5 years with 300 essays. So it's a lot of moving pieces. So Sydney, right? Is this the first piece that you have out in the universe?
No, I have one in Fast Fallen Women as well.
Oh, in Fast Fallen Women. Okay. So Sydney is a 2-timer. And I mean that in the best way.
Yeah, right.
And your pull line, Sydney, is terrific. You said you talk about Gertrude Stein, right? And you say that I never asked an object for, hold on, where are you? Gertrude Stein. Before Stein, I never asked an object for its pronouns, which is a wonderful pull line. And Amy's for Marilyn Monroe is one I think that there must be a Marilyn Monroe museum or something, right, Amy? Is there? Do you know?
I don't really know, but
there must be. I'm sure there are shrines to Marilyn Monroe. But anyway, again, talking about famous women, Amy writing about Marilyn Monroe is really a great line saying, more people want to be you, Marilyn, than you ever wanted to be you. Mm-hmm. Which I think is a sort of a startling and really important idea about fame. That in a way she carried it, but she never owned it. And Laura and her daughter Julia talk about the idea of Taylor Swift, and not so much Taylor Swift as simply famous, but Taylor Swift as somebody almost that they feel that they know because they have gone to concerts of hers together, that they talk about her, that it's like they have a playlist. Laura and Julia actually made a playlist. Again, that's beyond my technical understanding, but my students love it. They have heard it. One of my students plays it in the office, and it's the way that Taylor Swift narrates the different parts of their lives. And then Susan Cossett, it is Cossett, right, Susan, rather than Cassette. Cossett writes about Cassette. It is Cassette. Hello, Susan. Writes about a fascinating writer that, how did you first decide to write on her, Susan?
You know, you gave me a list of 5 people, Gina.
Mm-hmm.
And forgive me for not putting my camera on because I'm eating lunch and don't want to like bore you with my chicken pupusas. But You gave me a list of 5 people. I know one was Dr. Ruth, one was Simone de Beauvoir, and then Radcliffe Hall. I just remember reading The Well of Loneliness, oh gosh, about 10 years ago. And then, of course, there was that wonderful cable series that was out for several seasons, Gentleman Jack,
Right.
which I loved. And I wanted to inhabit her character. I mean, being a straight white female from the United States, it required quite a bit of research to get into her character and get kind of her backstory and inhabit her and just write through the lens of what I perceived was her experience. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It was,
And you wouldn't let me take the easy way out. I wanted to write as Assia Wevel, and you said, no, go, here's 5.
and that's the part about being an editor that's fun too. I mean, there's a little bossy part, but it's sort of like, it's like, take the hard part, do it the way that, again, is going to create conversation. And so the Radcliffe Hall, Susan's great line is, surely there must be others like me those whose voices and desires differed, but somehow we're not wrong, unnatural, or immoral. And so Radcliffe's Hall, The Well of Loneliness, which was one of the first lesbian trans works of fiction that was critically received. I think that's still on banned book lists.
Oh, we're in Florida, Gina. Everything is banned.
Everything is banned.
Every book is banned. I swear, we figured out that probably we have I think about 40,000 titles or something, some maybe 4,000 titles in our book, in our store. And we figured out that at least half of them are banned in the state of Florida. So we might as well just call our bookstore the Banned Bookstore and get over it.
And hi, Bonnie Jean. Welcome, Bonnie Jean is here too. Has been a wonderful contributor and also been a champion of this book and has been in the 4 books. I think Bonnie Jean has been in every Fast Woman. So she is like the Fast Woman queen here, and is
don't tell my husband.
No, as I say, my acknowledgments to my husband is that my husband Michael has always been in favor of fast women. I mean, it's just, but I get to put it in print at the end. He's turning 80 next month. He was very well. I used to be able to run faster. It's like, it's fine. You catch up. It's okay. It's like I can slow down. You can speed up. It's fine. We're both still doing. And it's but Bonnie Jean, you have really been. You wrote about. I had the honor of you writing about the series for the Irma Bombeck workshop. A lot of us know each other. Amy and Bonnie Jean and I met at the Irma Bombeck Writers Workshop and got to celebrate that for a long time. And Bonnie Jean wrote about Irma Bombeck, who was an inspiration to many women writers. And Bonnie Jean, tell us about your essay.
Well, she meant a lot to me because my mom died when I was really young, and so I didn't read Irma in the newspapers per se. I found her in the library in her collections that I still have. And then I ended up buying a bunch on my shelf, and she offered those little glimpses into what it was like to be a woman when my mom was coming of age in the 70s and the 80s, and so I really felt like she offered not only mothering camaraderie at the time that I was becoming a new mother, but also just a little glimpse of what life might have been like for my mom, since I don't have any of her stories. So I write about that because to me that was very special, and it was very important to have those stories.
And you do, again, it's a wonderful job. It's a very sort of, it's about the intimacy that we have, as I think everybody is, Sydney's, as Laura's, as Susan's, as Amy's, that it's about, Julie Dennis, that this is, I'm giving everybody's names away. I'll give your social securities out at the end to make sure that people stay on. That's the most important part. Shoe sizes, all of that to be available. I'm sure that those are available right now anyway, but not that I'm bitter. But the idea that all of the portraits, this was been an interesting collection to put together, because it's the writers talking about their intimate relationships with the women that they're writing about. So it's sort of triangulated. You know, it's not only their sense of creativity, but how they were inspired by, or bothered by, or their imaginations were sparked by. So that Linda Button, who's a wonderful writer, wrote, for example, about Lizzie Borden.
Oh, let me interrupt. So I'm from New Bedford, Mass. And Lizzie Borden lived in Fall River, which is like 15 miles from New Bedford. And her trial was actually in New Bedford. And she's probably the most famous, infamous person who ever lived in our area. So I was so intrigued by this Lizzie Borden thing, and from a different perspective. And her house now is an Airbnb, so how the world goes round. But who would think that Lizzie Borden would be this incredible personality, you know?
Absolutely. But again, she captured people's imaginations because she was let off. The all-male jury, they were more terrified of the idea that her lawyer, because there was blood on the hem of her dress, as there like would be if you took an axe to people. Like,
Right.
Yeah. So there was blood on the hem of her dress, but her attorney was going to bring up that the blood on a woman's dress could come from something other than murder. And the idea that he was going to talk about menstruation was so much more horrifying to these 12 good citizens than the idea that she could have like chopped up, right? Like just chopped up her stepmother and her father. It was like, no, anything but menstruation. No, dismemberment, eyeballs hanging out, lips separated, hands in another room. Fine. Just don't talk about getting a period. Anything. And Linda Button's fabulous line, because Linda has worked in PR and in publishing, and, you know, again, a woman of letters, as everybody is in the collection. But Linda's wonderful line, bringing in sort of corporate speak, I had to make plans and then execute them.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just, it should be on a again, everybody's pull line should be on a t-shirt. I had to make plans, then execute them. How great is that? That's just fabulous. And I just think so. While Irma Bombeck would inspire Bonnie Jean in a different way, making her feel a sense of connection to like, okay. And again, I believe Bonnie Jean, one of the great parts of your essay is about, you know, the Irma emphasizing the lack of perfection in being a parent, that it's impossible to be perfect. And that's what made everybody feel like they were part of Irma's circle. They were part of her tribe, that she could be this fabulous writer, the successful, wildly best-selling, one of the best-selling books of 1979, I think, was The Grass is Always Greener Over the Septic Tank, and self-effacing, but never self-deprecating. I mean, she wouldn't take pieces of herself. She was not devoured by, but she would give parts of herself so that to sustain her readers. And but for Lizzie Borden was just like, yeah, I got away with it. Wasn't that great? And so there's a shamelessness to it that's just that's also just a lot of fun. So I mean, most of the people who are as I think all bookstore owners and bookstore people know, that people who are readers, what would you say, 60% of readers are wannabe writers too? Do you feel like people come in wanting to?
I think there's certainly a lot of them. Certainly a lot of them who come in who are writers who have self-published books. And actually one of our most popular events that we do it twice a year, is a book fair for local authors who have self-published books. It's a big success all the time. I think everybody wants to be a writer. You know, everybody I know.
Yeah, well, you wrote for the first book. Right?
I did.
Yeah,
right.
Fast Funny Women. Georgia's right there. I mean, this is, I think people who are around books are inspired to then create themselves,
right.
and not not in a competitive way, although there's always that little bit of like, I bet I could do that. But in a sense that like our stories are important because you hear somebody's story and then you go, oh, I got one that's similar to that, but different. And then it's like stone soup. It's like you bring something to the table. Like you realize, oh, I have that onion. You know, I don't know if it's any good anymore, but I'm going to bring the onion and it'll add some flavor. And it's combining all of those to see how they mix and how they inform each other. That's such a hiya, Sherry. Sherry is here. So nice. Hi. And so we're talking about how readers, many of whom want to become writers, and how those of us who are writers are inspired. Again, that is sort of part of the theme of the book. And it is, Georgia, such an important idea because many self-published authors don't have distributors for their books.
Right. Well, none of them do.
Yeah,
they have themselves as distributors.
Yeah, and that's a tough gig. Where one of the great things about Woodhall Press, Fast Funny Women by Woodhall Press, is that Woodhall distributes, and there's Neve, hi Neve, who writes about Queen Maeve of Scotland. My God, I'm sorry, I'm going to behead myself now.
Yes.
Of Ireland.
Kill yourself with charcuterie the way she went down.
Exactly, which is what her queen, who has I wouldn't say has some Lizzie Borden in her, but had was not an apologetic, demure, sort of a ladylike figure. So one of Neve's wonderful lines from her essay is, what was it? Warrior queens, they're just like us. Something along that line. And Neve, when we were starting to talk, so your books, if you have ordered them, as I hope you have, is your local independent bookstore or from Georgia. Oh, well done.
Yes.
Julie, did you get it from Bookstore One?
Yeah, we have them in stock and online.
Yeah, that's right, in stock and online. And we want to support Georgia and the bookstore, and it also happens to be a New York Times reporting bookstore. So that's also a good thing. We love that in a bookstore. We're not supposed to say anything about it. I don't care. I'm talking about Queen Maeve of Ireland and Lizzie Borden. I'm fine. I can say this is it. And Amy, yes, please.
I'm sorry. I'm still stuck on Lizzie Borden and I'm getting ahead of us, but maybe the next book should be Fast Bloody Women.
It goes off of the F, but I think that Fast Bloody Women would actually, it's a really good title, Amy, because there's so many ways. So not only can everybody
go a lot of ways,
red tent again, but we can also have all of those the lovely murderesses that we adore.
Yeah,
because everyone likes a good murderess, and as Margaret Atwood says, murderess is such a more intriguing word than murderer.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Some guy with a bludgeon in an alley, murderess. It's like we sit up a little straighter and go, oh, tell me about it.
We can all tap into our inner murderess these days, I think.
And Sherry, so what made you choose? Are you one of the poor souls that I gave the list of people to write about, or did you choose?
No, I had seen the post on Facebook, and one of the people was Golda Meir, and this was before the war started, because I remember I was sort of like finishing up the book, my essay went, and I said, oh my God, what should we do? And kind of like soldiered on. But when I saw the Golda Meir, I thought, it just really was triggering a lot for me, because I remembered that when my parents are Holocaust survivors, and when I was 12, my first overseas trip was to Israel, and we actually went to like a Maccabi game, and Golda Meir was the prime minister at the time, and just seeing her being driven around and everybody cheering, it was the first time I think I'd seen a woman in a position of power. So it was just something that stuck with me. So when I saw that Facebook post, I was like, I didn't know I felt so passionately about Golda Meir,
And it's a wonderful essay, and it's the idea of drawing on what Sherry does, is to draw on her own childhood experience. And so even though, as as Sherry was writing the essay, the political changes were crashing down around us that were only we didn't realize it was going to be, the opening
Right.
bounds of what we're going to be an orchestration of different political sounds that we're living in. But Sherry and I had a conversation about, should this change? Should I mention what's happening at the moment? And I thought it was important. It was sort of like with Amy, like important to stay with what you have, because the writing has to, it lives or dies on the page because of the sort of continuing now of when you're writing it. And if every writer tried to update what she was doing in reaction to every single thing that was going on, then that would be one of those cases that I think keep people from writing. We were talking a little bit before everybody came on. I'm so glad to see everybody here. It's a real honor.
And the present becomes past. So
absolutely,
quickly.
immediately. I mean, immediately there, but that it keeps people from writing or from sending their work out into the public, because it's like, oh, but it's gonna have changed by the time it comes out. And it's, yes, the world will have changed, but your writing is still going to speak to the essentially important, right? That it's going to always be there. So
the truth that I wrote the essay from remains.
Right. Oh. And that's why it's important to send it out and not try to keep it, always updating. So that Neve also drew on her experience of being a little girl in Ireland. Can you tell everybody, Neve, about?
Sure. So I was born in Sligo, which is where Maeve is buried. And you learn about Queen Maeve almost as you learn your ABCs, because almost anywhere in the town you can see Maeve's grave or Ben Bulben, which is our mountain. It's like a big hill, but it's a mountain in our hometown. And you go up there. I just saw my uncle actually, and he said, you can't go on the grave anymore. They're trying to protect it. But in the 80s, you could bring your rock up and you would go. And so we learned all about Queen Maeve, and she was this fierce queen. And of course, I don't know if you're just born knowing, but like the idea that there was a queen and not a king, it just resonated, and you kind of recognize that was a big deal. And then I read Bonnie Jean, your essay about when Gina calls, you say yes. And Gina called, and one time in my whole career I've said no, and I waited 5 minutes and there was no response, and I replied back and just said, when's the deadline? Which was the piece I wrote for my wedding. So I got to dive into who Maeve actually was, and she was awesome. She's buried standing up, holding her weapons ready to go in case she comes back from the afterlife. I'm trying to remember the whole story with the bullet, but like she had several lovers, and she got in a competitive fight with her main husband lover, and they'd wake up and start competing. They'd have breakfast, lunch, dinner, compete. He had the prize bowl of Ireland. She said, I'm going to take it. She did. I think it led to her downfall in the end. She brought in armies. It changed Irish history. And then she went down by a piece of cheese. Her nephew was mad that she had killed I think it was her sister, just to stay number one. And he took a piece of cheese in a slingshot and got her. So death by charcuterie. But then they buried her standing up, facing west, ready to go should her enemies come back, and should she. So she was just an all-around cool person, but the opportunity to go into who she actually was and not this Maeve that I had in my mind as a little kid was really a fun exercise.
And it's a wonderful story, because it brings like the essay on Eleanor of Aquitaine, where Eleanor of Aquitaine in Fast Funny Woman is being interviewed by a group of like feminist scholars now. And Eleanor of Aquitaine gets very impatient. She's like, why are you asking me about what kings I married? Why are you asking me about my lovers? Isn't this like 2024, 25? Aren't we supposed to have moved on to other things? Don't you want to know my philosophies? Don't you want to know my theories about life and death? Don't you want to know my theories about God and power? And you're asking me what it was like, what I was wearing, what my jewelry, you're asking me who I was sleeping with. what's happened to women? What do you know? It's like, that's what I would ask her too. And it's like, well, these essays, because they're such different conversations with people. They're really fun to read, and you can read because everything is under 750 words. You really can read them all while you're having a cup of coffee, while you're waiting online, while you're on hold for something else. They're written, or you can read them all at once, if you're waiting for a flight. But the idea is that it's like you're sitting at a dinner party with just a great bunch of people who are telling you about their great friends.
So can I bring up, not only was I fascinated by Lizzie Borden, but the fact that Mae West was featured. I think we remember Mae West, and she was this bigger than life person. I mean, I think she was the Dolly Parton of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, but a remarkable life, a playwright. I mean, a great businesswoman. They just knew what to do. And I thought she was very cool that Mae West was featured.
Oh, absolutely. No, Mae West is one of my personal heroes. She the pull line from Kimba Dalfrey is, remember, is West online. Remember, if you only live once, but if you do it once, if you do it right, once is enough. And that the idea of Mae West, and then we'll, I hope that Julie will, I hope Julie stays, that Julie, writing about Lily Tomlin, that, that these women of humor, I don't know how to do the chat, but I want to make sure that Julie knows that was just going to bring her in. So anyway, somebody could write. I just feel bad about Julie. Anyway, the idea that Mae West was, again, this larger than life. I think the comparison to Dolly Parton is really a good one. I hadn't thought of that. That's really smart. And that she wrote like Go West, Young Man, right? And she kept the copyright to it. And she was the one who discovered Cary Grant.
Oh, I didn't know. That's
interesting. There's Julie. I said, we're going to talk about your Lily Tomlin, right? Yeah, because I want to talk about the use of humor. How many of these women are funny that we're talking about? How many of the women who are here? But that Mae West, I mean, she and Tomlin, they're interesting figures because we project our own wishes for voice onto them, because they say what we're thinking, but they have permission, they have given themselves permission, they have the guts, they have the timing, they have the brilliance, they have the genius to be able to do that. But Mae West, unlike Tomlin, created a character and stayed in it. Tomlin created all of these different characters, and along with her partner, but the search of intelligent life in the universe. But Mae West created the persona of Mae West, and again, so that when she saw Cary Grant, I think he was an extra. And he was walking across the lot, and hi, Ria, and she said, "What's that?" I mean, it's objectification and everything. She said, "What's that?" I said, "Oh, he's, a young man from England who just came over." And she said, "If it talks, it's in my next movie." I thought, okay, but for a woman who was in her 40s at that point, to just be objectifying this male body, that even is quite human. If it talks, it's in my next movie, and that was in She'd Done Him. I think it was in She'd Done Him Wrong. I think was the next one he was in. And he plays a preacher, and her job is to get him to yell out, shout, and say amen in different ways. And it's interesting, but she is absolutely fabulous. And Julie wrote about Lily Tomlin, who is another, I mean, several generations later, but still sort of cut from the same cloth, right, Julie? I think you're on mute.
Can Julie unmute?
Oh, there you go. That was just, you're still on mute. You can't unmute? No? Mute Julie M's phone and it won't let you?
Huh.
I can read what Julie said.
We could play a game of charades.
Exactly. It's like, right. This she's larger. Again, this is what we all have trouble. We all have trouble with technology.
Julie, do you know where your audio icon is? Just click on that.
Is it because she's on her phone? Is she on her phone? Might be different.
She's on her phone.
It looks like she is, right?
Right.
Yeah. We love you, Julie.
Yeah, this is so well here. But this is Julie writes, if I were Julie, I'd be saying, the first time I laughed out loud during the 1985 Broadway production of The Search for Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe happened when Chrissy, one of the main characters inhabited by Lily Tomlin, says, it's also one of my favorite lines in the world. I tell it to my students. People who have been my students, I think, will remember it. So Chrissy, who's doing exercises, right? She's an exercise wearer at the time. And she says, all my life I've wanted to be somebody. But now I see now that I should have been more specific.
Yes.
Right? I want to be somebody, but now I realize I should have been more specific. And it's like, I tell my students, follow your dreams as long as they include dental. It's like, it's so, I mean, the characters that, Tomlin go through, and as Julie herself, a performer, says, Lily's influence, I count a few years after encountering Lily's truth-talking Trudy, I left Frito-Lay and returned to my adopted hometown, Chicago. I went from fussing over fried pork rinds in a corporate world, working for Frito-Lay, to conducting research on toilet paper habits and searching for a creative outlet, which is wonderful because you go from looking after toilet paper, searching for a different outlet, for a more creative outlet, to answer the siren song of the stage. The Second City's improvisation training program did just that. So Julie takes us through her own journey as a performer, and then says that she began reinventing herself sort of with Lily Tomlin as part of an inspiration and as a touchstone for that. I think that I'm interpreting that correctly, right? Oreo, she said she was teaching brand marketers how to write purpose statements. Yes, Oreo does have a purpose beyond satisfying a sweet tooth. One student evaluation struck me, an evaluation of Julie's performance, and said she's funny. That made my day. And how many of us have had our day made, right? Amy understands it. Neve understands it. Rhea understands it. Rhea, who's been in other collections of this one. But I wasn't sure, what she was going to do as she was reinventing herself. Julie said, but I knew that writing and humor would play a part. And as she said about this, and again, in a way, not that everything being informed, especially humor writers being informed by the lack of perfectionism, as Lily Tomlin said, the road to success is always under construction.
Yeah.
And so Julie ends with that great line, which again is just brilliant, because it takes the ordinary and makes us hear it in a whole different way. So Julie, the irony of not being able to hear your voice as we're talking about finding your voice. But again, there's something funny about that too. So, we should have. But we'll do another interview and we'll make sure that you're there. And it's technology. It's just the horrors of technology. Okay.
Gina, could I ask a question?
Please, absolutely.
Yeah,
Please.
I don't think that either Molly Peacock or Phyllis Levin are on today, are they? Or am I just missing them?
No, they're not here. So,
no, but I wanted to kind of ask you and maybe your group of writers, I found their joint essay to be so interesting and so profound, and that is the joy and the pleasure of writing together. And we heard here in Sarasota just a couple weeks ago, Ann Patchett spoke, and she came with her writing partner, who's, I'm going to blank on her name, I should have thought about it, but they had the same thing since they were very young women writing together. So could you talk about that a little bit? I love that idea, and I personally think it's so valuable. So
it's absolutely. So Molly Peacock and Phyllis Levin, who are these two incredibly well-respected, you can find their work in the Poetry Foundation. Molly has become a recent bestseller. I think her book, The Widow's Crayon Box, at least she's a bestseller in Canada. She wrote a piece, or I saw it on Facebook, but about how she had wanted to be published in the New Yorker, to see one of her poems in the New Yorker since she was 16. And now at 77, that has happened. So it's taken a while, but she actually made it. And that, Julie, are you here?
Yes.
We hear Julie's voice.
But
Yes,
there are two of you now.
I don't know that you need me to talk. I gotta get
all right, but yeah, it's okay. Yes,
on with what you were saying.
It's fascinating. Okay, but I've just talked about Phyllis, and yes, we do have two of you. We have two viewpoints of you.
I'm getting rid of one.
This is something this is the new technology. Which one is the real Julie?
Right.
Which one is the persona that she has? Sort of the looking up is sort of interesting. And that's when you need a good foundation garment. It's when you have that. Looking up. It's so I knew Phyllis Levin when we were both in graduate school together at the City University of New York. So Phyllis Phyllis has come up here to speak at the University of Connecticut, and I was at her wedding. Interesting story about her courtship and the idea of being a second wife. And so she's the opposite of me. She is sort of graceful, and she has a very good sense of humor, but she sort of speaks thoughtfully and with a sense of gravitas, and again, very low key. And Molly, I think, is a little, sort of more noisy and eclectic, and but Phyllis is absolutely wonderful. And the idea that they have met, and both of their essays talking about each other, that they have met only, over meals to talk about their work. And it's, again, the breaking of bread. And I love one of the lines is that they have always had full fat butter, right? We always choose, this was Phyllis Levin talking about Molly Peacock, we always choose full cream, full butter. We've never substituted low fat for anything, certainly not low fat poetry. And they talk about the idea of how working with someone, they read each other's work. I think now, it started even more frequently. Now they do it once a month or so, but they try to, make sure that it is done together. And if they have to travel to make that happen, they travel to make it happen. And that they read each other always with generosity and kindness. And so that they understand that their words are going to be welcomed by each other. And so this 40 years, 45 years of gathering and making work together and seeing it as a gift that they're giving to each other is absolutely remarkable.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
And they're both very different, but it's the process of whatever gets you to create and to continue creating. I mean, that's the hardest part. Sydney, again, you just got out of this program, this writing program. Have you been writing since you left the program?
Of course, I never stop.
Okay, you never stop. No, that's good. But do you find yourself writing in different ways because you've gone through a sort of, an MA in this?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think part of one of my favorite things about the MA was realizing that with each person's completely different background, completely different level of experience. I mean, we had people in their 70s and people younger than I am, which, people newly 20, all around the world. And you can tell um, that their experiences show up in the way that they write, in their particular voice. And so when I was playing around with poetry and creative nonfiction and even dabbling in fiction, which I had never really done before, I was observing the way that their experiences affected their voice. And then I was seeing, okay, how how is my voice developing based on my background? And I really started taking to my neurodivergence and asserting that as like part of my writing in a more conscious way, because that is a huge part of my identity. And now it's something I'm proud of. It might be niche and it might be strange, the way it shows up in my writing, but it's something that I've learned people really admire because it's distinctly me.
Yes, that's great. And it's the finding of the voice. And that was, Sydney had a voice from the first day she was in my first creative writing class. It was like, okay, this is it. And I remember on the first day, I think you didn't let us see you. And by the end, because it was during the pandemic, right? So it was all online, which was very new to me, as you could imagine in those days. And then by the end, Sydney was fully there. It was like it was like a graphic novel, watching a person sketch themselves in, and
It was really like a woman refusing to be placated in a way. I was finding my voice as a woman and I was unapologetic there.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great. All of these things. So Ria's taught writing for many years. What is the most important thing you think you tell your writing students about the craft and art of writing?
Well, I haven't taught writing in quite a while, but I just had lunch the other day with someone um, with whom I was discussing writing. That's not why we had lunch. She's actually someone I interviewed for an article I wrote, and she decided she liked me so that we should have lunch together.
Oh, good.
And then she brought me cupcakes, so it was all good.
Mhm.
It was all
Nice.
good. But she, very bright woman in her mid-40s, mom, 3 kids, owns her own business, really on the ball, and she wants to do more writing. So she was just sort of, I say poking sounds bad, but poking me in a nice way. And I said, remember, this is something I did used to tell my students, remember that the story never ends. You just decide when to stop telling it.
Really good. That's really
And
good.
right. And of course, you have to also decide where to begin. And I think most people have a sense of that. But the part about the ending, can also be troublesome, I think it's with that part, I think it's helpful to remember that the story doesn't end. Your job is to decide where to end the telling of the story.
I think that's a great point. And I mean, it was one of the things about keeping all of the essays at 750 words. And I can tell you that telling Jane Smiley that she cannot have, more words is a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
I also found, and Gina knows this, for many years, until they decided that they didn't want to pay us anymore, I did an op-ed column for the New Haven Register on gender issues. And they didn't pay a lot. They paid an honorarium of about $100. You're not going to, buy a car on that. But it was a sign that the work was worth something. And then when they decided that they didn't want to pay their op-ed columnists anymore, I thought, I do not need to support the New Haven Register with my labor. So I stopped writing the column. But the point of my telling you this is that I had friends and acquaintances who always said to me, even if I didn't see your name on it, I would know that it was your column.
Yeah. That's great. And that's important. And again, that's the voice.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
It's your perspective on it. Bonnie Jean, you're just talking about the best Mark Twain quote. Go ahead.
Oh, it's the the whole apologize for such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right.
I and they say it's Mark Twain, but who knows? It could have been Will Rogers too. They both are attributed, or Ben Franklin. Pick one.
Or Oscar Wilde. Or
Right.
Mother Teresa. There are all these quotations attributed to Mother Teresa that she never
Yeah.
said.
But
It's
it's so
actually it's
true. It's
attributed
like
to
you've
Irish
gotta-
mothers too.
Yeah. You've
It's on
got to
T-cells.
get it all out and then weed out what do I really need to say, what's redundant, what's, all those things. So I didn't mean to speak over top of you. Sorry.
The other thing I talked to this woman about, I'd be interested in hearing what everybody else thinks. And I'm talking now about prose writing, and I'm talking specifically about nonfiction because that's what I write. I'm not a good fiction writer. I've tried my hand at it. It's always came out kind of lumpy. So my area is telling the stories that other people tell me or that I hear myself and making them into something that lives for the person who's reading it. And
I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. That's exactly what Bonnie Jean does in her column. Bonnie Jean column does.
So something else I talked to this woman about the other day was the importance of rhythm. And it's a little bit hard to explain, but often when I write, as everybody else does, I just, dump a whole bunch of words on the page and then see which ones make sense. And then I'll write something and I'll read the sentence over and I'll say to myself, that's lumpy.
Mm-hmm.
It's lumpy. It just doesn't have the right cadence for what I'm trying to say. So I'm wondering
like
how
poetry.
Say
right?
what?
It's the same as writing poetry. Prose is the same as writing poetry, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
there has to be
And I think that is one of, you have to use, with 750 words or 7,000 words or 700,000 words, you have to use the real estate of the page. So you have to be, and this is, Julie, I think that, you were talking in part about Lily Tomlin's great delivery and everybody who wrote for the book, when it's, you have timing on the page, the way you have timing in a comedy sketch or in a good lecture or in a conversation where you realize that there are moments when the page has to breathe. You have to give somebody a second where you have to, the paragraphing is sort of like a real thing because it's like leading, you're leading the dance. And if somebody is just dragging, I always remember that line from Catcher in the Rye, where he's dancing, where Holden is dancing with some woman, and it was like dragging the Statue of Liberty around the dance floor. Oh, it was such a wonderful analogy. But that's like, you can't just be dragged as a reader. You can't just be dragged around by somebody who doesn't have a sense of rhythm, it doesn't have flow, is not in touch with other things, who's not going to let you look up. You can't watch your feet the whole time as a writer. And you need to give your readers that sense of when they can look up. And that again is tricky when or it's difficult and it's complicated when you are trying to say as much as you possibly can in a small space. But it's so that's the useful part of having to work within a small space. It's like putting everything into the blender and hitting liquefy. I mean, it's like everything is going on at the same time. And it's like, and then as Maria was suggesting, and as everybody who's a writer here understands, is that, just as she said, there's a time when something, it may not be finished, but it's done.
Right. Yeah.
Done. It's done. And that you have to let it go because it'll sit there, it'll haunt you. It will then become vampiric. It'll become the thing that will not let you go. It'll start to sit on your shoulder and it'll start to get its teeth into your neck and drain you of every possible other thing that you could be doing.
It may not be finished, but you have to let it go.
Yeah, exactly. Or it'll finish.
Yeah.
Julie, you had a
in terms of too many or writing too many words, I love having a constraint. And from working in advertising, I know that the creatives liked having some constraints because it let them be more creative. If you just say, paint anything or, write anything you want, it can be more difficult. But my thing with Lily was that so much of the quotes they weren't Lily. They were Lily as Chrissy, Lily as somebody. So it was like hard to do that. And then I realized it didn't matter because Lily was those people. And she was a character, but that was Lily. And when I performed myself and when I did my one woman show, it was like I was Julie the character, but I was still, it's still like who I am now. But it took me a while to get down to those 750 words because like, oh, I have to say it's as Chrissy because it's not Lily. Everything is attributed to Lily Tomlin and Bartlett's quotes or whoever puts those books together. But none of them were spoken by Lily as Lily. They were spoken by Lily as someone else.
Right. And that's an interesting, and I mean, I think every woman especially has an alias that she keeps locked up somewhere, fully packed, another persona that she can sort of deal with. And there's Neve who's working at Yale University, and even Yale, you have to keep waving to keep the lights on, right? I mean, we do it at UConn, but damn, even Yale makes you, no, I'm a body, I'm here, right? This is, yes, otherwise the lights will go off. This is what education and academia has come to. Hello. This is our finest institutions. Hello. This is, no, it's just, sorry. I can't, it's just, you can't make it up. You can't make it. Anyway, but it is, yes, there's the idea of using the double and in a way everybody writing about somebody else, everybody writing about the woman that they either chose to write about or who I bullied them into writing about, was also this idea of another self. I mean, I feel like the book, and it was Darian Huji who actually said, how about why don't you have us write about the women who influenced us? She was the real inspiration for the topic. She writes about Joyce Chen, the chef. And I was like, that's a great idea. And and I thank her in the acknowledgments, along with Michael. But it is, oh, here we are. Lunch is over, huh? But that it is to have that other self, just to go back to what Julie was saying, it's like speaking in the different voices. And we realize, because I think to be a woman in now and in ever was always to have other voices. That's why I think it's hard for a lot of us as writers, as performers, as everything that we do, that it's hard to have just that single self, because we weren't brought up to be ourselves. We were brought up to be somebody better than we could ever be. And given that we could never be that, you were never going to be, St. Teresa, you were never going to be the Virgin Mary, you were never going to be Golda Meir, you were never going to be, but then to discover, going back to Neve's line, all of these women, they're just like us. What we like about them is their ferocity, their daring, their ability to, be buried upright, or to make trouble, to be who they decided they were going to be in a world that really tried as harder to stop them from being that. I mean, certainly, Amy, with Marilyn Monroe, you took this to heart, and you took her heart into your heart. Tell us what you had to deal with when looking at her. Because you were talking about her having to be this woman who was performing everybody but herself, because herself was not.
Yeah. She fascinates me because, well, she's nothing like me in terms of if you were to go with her image. And yet she was brilliant. I wanted to tap into what a lot of people may not have known about her. We all have images of Marilyn. There isn't a person on the planet that doesn't. And she really was an amazing woman. And to your point, was going against what people wanted her to be. I don't know. She fascinates me. And the more I found out about her, the more I loved her. And she really stood up for things.
Yeah.
So.
I just read something, and I don't remember who it was who wrote this, literally a day or two ago. A friend of hers who's moderately well known herself wrote about walking down the street with Marilyn Monroe, with Marilyn just in regular clothes with a kerchief and sunglasses and an old coat and everything, just walking down the street. And then Marilyn turned to her friend and said, do you want to see me be her? See what happens when I'm her. And the friend kind of went, okay. And so Marilyn took off the kerchief, fluffed up her hair, took off the sunglasses, did a little pouty lip thing, and everybody turned around and started staring at her. And she didn't have to do a whole lot to transform herself. It took seconds for her to transform herself.
But it became this other public self that had only that only lined up marginally with who she was, and that it became a performance to be her.
And a burden. I think for many famous people, fame is a burden.
I think it's for everybody now with social media, especially as a writer, because we have to have a platform and we have to have an expertise and we have this niche and we have all of these things. So it's like, okay, what if I want to do a different genre or a different persona that nobody's ever seen from me before? Well, we don't know where to put that on the shelf. So you're screwed. So, and it's really difficult because you're told to hone this platform and then you're pigeonholed into being that person for the rest of your professional career.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And that it is, and again, understanding that there are these categories and that it, to a certain extent, it's like playing inside the categories, but that it is you're selling, it's the sales, it's the selling the part that is going to reach people. So making it into a shape that somebody knows what the shape is. They know how to take the shape, so that the bookstore owners know how, again, what part of where does this go?
Right.
And so that, does this go in women's studies? Does this go in humor? Does it go in memoir? Does it go in autobiography? Does it go in popular culture? Does it go in, but you can't say, well, it sort of covers all of that. Then they'll say, forget it. I got it.
Right.
And I mean, it's just sort of like, some people, it's like saying, what color is it? Well, it's a little purple and it's blue and it's blah and it's blah. I'm not buying that. What's that going to look like when it arrives? I'm going to send it back immediately. So anyway, so Georgia, what advice do you have for everybody?
What advice do I have?
Yeah.
It's so terrific to read, all of these essays, and so terrific really to think about people, whether they're other women, whether they're famous or not, and how they have influenced us and what we take from their lives. So, my advice is to keep paying attention, to keep looking around you, and not at just the most famous people, not just at Taylor Swift, but your mother, your daughter, your coworker, and how beautiful those people are and what they can bring to you in your life. To me, that's the advice.
Good.
And keep writing. And
keep writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And Gina, this has been terrific.
Oh, thank you. You make it very easy. And thanks to everybody who came. And this will be up online, right? Other people can watch.
It will be on our YouTube channel, and we'll send you a link, Gina. We'll make that link available. It'll be up in a few days. Takes a couple days for us to, pull it together, but we get it done. So,
of course. Thank you for the honor of your company, everybody, for a great lunch, and we'll see you again. Thank you.
Great to see you.
Bye.
Thanks for everything.